Good afternoon. Welcome to today's. It's Tuesday, February 21st of 2017. Our Tech Tuesday webinar looking at Skype in education. Um, my name is Mark Oakton. I'm a coordinator here at the Instructional Design and Professional Learning Division. And with us we have Mark Thomas, Super Tech Talk, one of our former digital coaches. And Mark, where are you at now?
Teaching fourth grade at Bruner Elementary School.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And Mark is our guru of all things related to Skype, and he's forgotten more about Skype and using it in the classroom than I will probably ever know. So I am so grateful to have him out online with us today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Thomas, who is our Skype resident expert.
All right, I guess I'm the other half of the Mark and Mark show, aren't I? All right, what is Skype? Skype is a video conferencing software that allows you to communicate with anybody anywhere else in the world as long as you both have an internet connection. During this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot specifically about Skype and that software, but also know that Google Hangouts can be used. It's also video conferencing software and can be used in the exact same ways. We're just focusing mostly on Skype, but you can use both. Why would you want to use Skype in the classroom? Well, it's a free product. It doesn't cost you anything, as well as Google Hangouts. Everybody in the district has a Google account, and along with that comes access to Google Hangouts. You can easily get a Skype account for free. It's an awesome way for students to practice their communication skills as they interact with other classrooms, other experts, other adults. In presentations, they can ask questions, they can use their voice, and they can develop those communication skills. Using Skype gives you access to the whole world, really. You can communicate with experts in a certain field that you study or that your class works on. You can communicate with authors and illustrators. You can communicate with scientists. I've talked with classes in New Zealand, in Hawaii, and Canada, places where my class would never, ever be able to go unless I used something like Skype. We have some fabulous experiences that way. It also increases their global awareness, makes them realize that there is actually a world out there outside of Las Vegas. Introduces concepts like north, south, east, west, latitude, longitude, the hemispheres, all sorts of helps them to realize that there are issues and cultures other places in the world, and helps to bring in that awareness of we live in a great big beautiful place. So those are awesome, fabulous reasons why you would want to do something like using Skype or Google Hangouts. What kind of equipment will you need? Well, first of all, you're going to have a computer with internet access. That can be a desktop, a laptop, an iPad, any kind of mobile device, as long as you have access to the internet. Skype and Google Hangouts are not blocked by the district, so you have full access to use them. Whatever device you use needs to have a USB webcam, or excuse me, a webcam of some kind, whether it's plugged in through USB or built in, like on a Mac or in your iPad or something like that. You'll also need a microphone, obviously, so that you can communicate. And of course, you'll need a set of classroom speakers so you can hear the conversation going back and forth. You also need, as I mentioned, a Skype account and a Google account if you're doing Google Hangouts. Marco, do you want to talk about how the teachers can get a free Skype account through their district Microsoft account?
Definitely. And I know this email has gone out from the user support services and TIS a couple of times, but there's Microsoft Office Professional, and Office for Mac is free for all CCSD faculty and staff, and that's through the Microsoft Office 365 Education for Faculty program. You'll use your Interact email address to register and download the software for that. And I will paste the link. In fact, I'll put that into the text chat right now. And it comes out a little bit big. Let me do a quick screen share of that. 1 second. If you take a picture of that link, or just remember this a goo.gl slash J10 HIN, or that might be JI0 HIN, I think.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think that's right.
and
I
now
think those are
that's the
both
link to
eyes.
take. I'll type it in. Now, if you take that link, um, you simply use your Interact email address. You'll click on the Find Out If You're Eligible link and put your Interact in there. And within 24 hours, you'll get a link back from Microsoft that tells you that you're eligible for the free Microsoft Office information. That creates your account. So then you just go into Education Skype, do a search for Education Skype, and that will take you into creating your Skype account. You'll download the Skype software, or if you don't have access on your computer to download it, have your site-based technician download it and install it, and then you just use that same account to log in, and you're good to go. It's really that quick and easy.
All right, thank you, Mark. Okay, so we're going to look at.
Hold on 1 second,
Oh,
Mark. Doreen, you
sure.
don't need to go to that site right now. That's just telling you how to create your account with Skype. That way you can go in and do this all later yourself.
Yeah, Skype was bought out by Microsoft a while back, a few years ago, I think. So now when you use your Microsoft account, you get a Skype account. So Microsoft has, on their website, has built in some tools to make it easy to find some of these mystery Skype, some of these experts, some of these lessons that you can use with Skype in your classroom. So I'm going to do a screen share right now and take you out to this website. Make a note of it, education.microsoft.com, and you can go there later after the webinar and explore on your own and find some people to hook up with. But I'm going to do a screen share as I go out to that website. Mark, will you let me know? I can't see the text chat. Will you let me know if you can see my
Yep, we can see it.
window? Okay, perfect. Is it just my browser window, or do you see my whole desktop?
I see just your browser window.
Awesome. Okay, so I went to education.microsoft.com and I logged in. Actually, I'm not logged in yet with my account, but if I go to, on the left-hand side, Skype in the Classroom, this website, this education website, has a lot of other tools for Microsoft users in the classroom, like Microsoft Office and some becoming Microsoft certified and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to focus on Skype in the Classroom. So I'm going to click on that link, Skype in the Classroom. And basically this is a repository of all sorts of connections that I can make with other Skype users. So you can see that I've got some virtual field trips, Skype lessons, collaborations, a mystery Skype, and guest speakers. And I'll talk about some of these later. But the purpose of this site is actually to find those connections. So let's pretend that I want to find a particular Skype lesson. I can click on that, but I've also got this filter button where I can filter by age group. So I'm making sure that if I'm a high school teacher, that I'm finding Skype lessons appropriate for them. If I'm teaching kindergarten, I can find lessons appropriate for them. I can also filter by subject, whether I teach history, geography, a science, reading, hooking up with authors, or something like that. So I can filter all of those out. Just to give you an example of how to find things, though, I'm just going to go straight to Skype lessons. And as I scroll down, I've got some featured Skype lessons, and I've got some new ones, some popular ones. I can scroll through each of these and find something interesting. And for example, I see this Skype lesson is about drawing with a picture book artist. So if I click on this link, I can see that he does these Skypes. He scheduled himself at various times and dates from November until 2019. And I get a little bio about him. And I've got a button here so I can see what he actually does, see if this is something that interests me. And then I can click down here under register for this Skype lesson, and it will show me a calendar of his days and times that are available, and I can register for that time. And then it also gives me contact information for him, so I can email him and we can make any arrangements, do some pre-planning, whatever needs to be done. On the day of our Skype lesson, I would then launch Skype, log in, and search for him, find his Skype username and make that connection and run away with the lesson. So all of these searches are similar fashion. If I go to field trips, I can find that they've got field trips on coral reef research. There's a good one in UK. This was posted several years ago. It's visiting a primate rescue center. And I can see it's even got the appropriate ages. They feel that this is a lesson appropriate for kids 6 and up. So I can read a little bit about it and go register for that. So that's really what you use this website for, is to find those connections. It's also easy, and I'll show you another couple of websites later in a little bit. It's also easy to just go out and do a Google search for things like virtual field trips or Skype with an author, things like that, and you can find a lot of connections that way as well. All right, so we should be back at the presentation. Mark, I assume that's what we can see?
Yes.
All right, so different kinds of Skype adventures that you can have with your classroom. Using Skype is an excellent way to do virtual field trips. Give your students the opportunity to visit a place that they normally wouldn't be able to visit. Here's a few websites that you can go to check them out. The National World War II Museum, which is, I believe, in New Orleans, does some virtual field trips where you can Skype in and they'll show you some of the equipment and artifacts that they have there. The Boston Tea Party ship, for those who do 5th grade and talk about the Revolutionary War, United States, or the older grades, I guess, that talk about that. Is it really got some really good experiences. I'm going to do a screen share and show you that website because that's kind of cool. This is a museum. I assume it's in Boston. I really honestly don't know their exact location. And this one costs. Most of these virtual field trips are free. There are some that do charge a fee. This is one that does charge. It costs $199. And they walk you out on the ship. You see a description here. They take you out on the ship. They show you some of the experience that you have on the boats. Walk down a replica of Boston Street during that time period. See a little bit of battle, what it was like on the ships, and what that whole experience was like. Again, if that's an area of study that you do, how awesome would that be to have your kids actually experiencing that, since it's kind of hard to get a bus to drive you all the way that way for a field trip in a day. But they've got several. You can schedule different days and times for that. They've got a couple of smaller experiences that are just like a 30-minute one, and so it's just really good experience. The Teacher's Guide, this last link here, teachersguide.com/virtual tours, has a list of a bunch of other websites that you can go to explore and find some other field trips. There's some that go out to coral reef. There's some that go out down into Antarctica. And of course, a variety of museums around the world will do some virtual field trips for you and let the kids see some of the exhibits that they have. So virtual field trips, awesome way of using Skype. You can also do, going back, let me step back onto that virtual field trip. I did an activity, I believe it was last year, with a kindergarten class where they had done a unit on farms and farm animals. And of course, kids living here in Las Vegas, down by the strip, had no idea what a farm was like or what a cow was like. And so I was able to hook up with a farm bureau in Iowa, who in turn connected me with two farms out there in the middle of Iowa. One was a dairy farm and one was a chicken farm. And the farmers there got on their iPads and went out into the field with whatever internet connection they could get. And they walked the kindergarten classes that I was working with, 4 of them, walked them around to see what the fields were like. We walked into the barn, saw where the cows were at. We went into where the chickens saw their coops up on the shelf, where they laid their eggs and how they gathered the eggs. They would lay their eggs and they would roll down this little tube and be gathered in this barrel down at the bottom. Talked about what they fed them, talked about how they took care of them. It was just an awesome experience for these kindergartners, and then they could ask some questions about them. And they heard the cows mooing and the chickens clucking and all of that. And so it's just something that majority of those kids, they would never ever be able to experience except through this kind of a virtual field trip. So that was just awesome. All right, authors. Love bringing in authors and other experts to talk with the kids. And authors, they absolutely love talking with kids. They love sharing their books, their pictures. They love sharing their writing process that they go through with kids, getting them excited about being writers themselves. A couple of good ones. These are 2 good sites. If you go out to that Kate Messner site, she is a children's book author, and she keeps a website where other authors will let her know that they're interested in doing Skype sessions with classrooms, and these are always completely free. That's all that they're. None of these authors charge, and so she keeps a list of that you can connect with any of those. You can connect with any of those authors to come into your classroom and talk with your kids. Again, had a wonderful experience with having an author come into one of my schools a few years ago during Nevada Reading Week. Brandon Mull, who wrote the Fablehaven series, was in town, and he was going out to different schools to do a live presentation with them. And for whatever reason, he got his directions mixed up and wasn't able to make it to the school that I was at. So after that fact, I emailed him the next day and said, hey, we have a lot of disappointed kids. And so he agreed to do a Skype session. And so a couple of weeks later, I had all the 3rd grade classes, actually, because there was a student in 3rd grade who absolutely loved Brandon Mull, one of his biggest fans. And so we gathered all the 3rd grade classes into the multi-purpose room, hooked up a computer to the big projector, big screen, and had Brandon Mull Skype in with us. And he did this whole interactive lesson where he talked to kids, and he had certain students stand up that he could see in the audience, and he would ask them questions about their writing and their brainstorming and how his process, how he went through that. And he showed us some of his drafts that he has. He showed us his little office in his home where he writes. And so again, I was able to bring in an author and make an authentic experience for those kids where they could learn what a real author does. And there's authors, again, they love doing that. They love coming into the classroom like that and sharing those kinds of experiences. But I love virtual field trips. I love speaking with authors via Skype, but one of my all-time favorite activities to do with Skype is a mystery Skype. A mystery Skype is a game that you play with another classroom someplace in the world where you ask them yes or no geography questions and try to guess the location of that classroom. I've done this for a couple of years now, and it has been one of the most fabulous activities you can do. The kids absolutely love it and are totally engaged in it. My goal this year, now that I'm back in the classroom as a fourth grade teacher, is to Skype with a class in all 50 states. And so far, I'm up to about 20, in the low 20s. I've still got more than half to go. But we have we've done a mystery Skype with a class in Hawaii. We've done in Alaska. We've done several back east. I just did Utah and I think it was Colorado a few weeks ago. We've done Arkansas. A few years ago, I was with a fifth grade class and they mystery Skyped with a classroom in New Zealand. And that was a treat because of the time difference. New Zealand was actually, I think they were a whole day ahead or a whole day behind, one or the other. So that kind of blew the kids' minds that they were talking to somebody and it wasn't even the same day. So, mystery Skype, many things that you can accomplish with a mystery Skype. First of all, kids learn those geography skills. They've got to know their north, south. They've got to know landmarks in the United States that they can use to ask those questions. So, for example, I might ask a question like, are you east of the Mississippi? To try and narrow down which state they're in. Because remember, you can only ask yes or no questions. I might ask, do you border California? Are you one of the four corner states? That New Zealand class, oh, that was a fun one to try to get the kids because they had no idea about how to do hemispheres, north and southern hemispheres. So when they realized they had to guess a class someplace in the world, we had to do a quick mini lesson on hemispheres and how to find the equator and whichever the one is that goes up and down. So all sorts of geography skills that come in. The critical thinking that comes into play with something like this, they're trying to narrow down to a specific state. And so the kids really have to think, does this question going to get me where I want to go? Does it eliminate the states that I want to eliminate? Or is it a good question or a poor question? Sometimes the kids like to ask, do you border Iowa? Well, that's a hard question to answer if you actually live in Iowa. And we've talked about that. How do you answer? How does that other class going to answer if they actually live in Iowa? So what makes a good question? What makes a bad question? Again, the problem solving skills that come into that and the kids just trying to find those answers. I've done it where we've tried to guess just the state. Sometimes we've tried to guess down to the city and sometimes even down to the school within the city, depending on how much time and how engaged the kids are. And kids are always wanting to try something like that. Everybody in the classroom has a job to do during a mystery Skype. So there's a lot of teamwork going on. Everybody contributes in some way, whether they're looking up on maps, whether they're communicating with the other class, asking the questions, but everybody is engaged in some way. So I mentioned that the job that everybody has, these are some suggested jobs that I usually use. There's others that you can have. We usually have a greeter, an individual who, when we initiate the Skype call, they will greet the other class. They will explain that I'm from Mr. Thomas's fourth grade class, and they will usually do something like a rock, paper, scissors to try and see who gets to ask the first question. Then we turn it over to our questioner and our answerer. The questioner is going to get a question from our class as a whole and ask that question to the other class. And the answerer, when the other class is asking questions to us, they're the ones that have to answer that. And the questioner and the answerer don't have to know the answers. The class can provide that for them, but they're the face on the camera. They're the ones that actually do the talking. Then I usually have Google mappers on the computer and printed atlases of the United States. And so they're the ones that are crossing off states as we eliminate possibilities so we can narrow it down to the one state that we're trying to find. A recorder is somebody, we've got to keep track of what questions we've already asked so we don't repeat ourselves. So I have a recorder. I put a huge sheet of butcher paper up on the wall and I have somebody recording the questions and recording the answers. And I usually do that for both questions that we ask and the questions that the other class asks. And then I've also got runners who run back and forth between the different groups to make sure that everybody's got the same message, same information, because sometimes it gets kind of loud in there. They get excited about what they're finding, about what the next possible question is or a clue to ask. And so the runners just run between the recorders and the questioners and the mappers just to make sure everybody has the same information. Occasionally I've done it where I've had a group of thinkers, a set number of kids, like 3 or 4 kids, who they're the ones coming up with the questions. They take the information given to them and they're trying to come up with the question. having a blogger and a photographer is a wonderful way of sharing this with the world, what kinds of things your class is doing at the moment. So all sorts of different jobs. Everybody in the class is involved in some way. Where do you find those classrooms to hook up with? Well, I wrote down education.skype.com, but that's an old one. If you went out to that educationmicrosoft.com site that we looked at earlier, that's one place where you can find. In fact, let me just jump out there real fast. I'm going to show you two places, actually, both of those that are on there. This is the Microsoft site. If I jump out to Mystery Skype, these are all teachers who are registered Skype users who would love to Skype. And if you look carefully, I don't know how easy it is for you to see, but if you look carefully in their little bio here, this Chrissy Lewin, who is in Connecticut, oh, it says the same time zone. I'm not logged in, so it doesn't know what time zone it is, but it does tell you the time zone that they're in, so you can see whether they're in, how far away they are. Because that's obviously going to be a concern, whether you're going to be in school at the same time. So you can schedule those. But there's all sorts of individuals here that you can find. You can search for one specific to your grade level. Like I said, I'm trying to find one from all 50 states, so I can target a certain state. I haven't done Wyoming yet, so I need to find somebody from Wyoming, and I search for a teacher there. So the Microsoft site is one good place, but my favorite place to find classes is on Twitter. If you're not a Twitter user, I highly recommend that you get yourself an account because there's a ton of education resources out on Twitter. There is a hashtag called hashtag Mystery Skype, where there's always teachers, tweeting back and forth looking for somebody. For example, a teacher here says, I have fourth graders that are learning about US regions. Would you like to mystery Skypes from Iowa? And Iowa is a state that I don't have, and I teach fourth grade, so this is a perfect, when this webinar is done, I'm going to send her a tweet and see if we can hook up sometime in March or April. Third grade teachers. We've even had second grade teachers. I worked with some middle school classes last year that did mystery Skype. They had a middle school geography class. So you can find all sorts of resources. I would say the majority of my connections I've made through Twitter. This tweet right here shows a third grade class, and the teacher took pictures of their activities showing how they were working there in that time. You can see them working in a small group and doing the Skype session right there, the video. So she posted pictures up there to show that. Great ways to share. So these two sites are the best ways to hook up with other classes. And I found a couple of mail. Go ahead.
Mark, we have a question from Mary Kirsten. How long does a mystery Skype session usually last?
Typically anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes, depending how good your class is getting and how easy it is to find the other class. I've had classes that were so into it that we went on for 45 minutes to an hour because they were really trying. It was one of those situations where they wanted to find down to the school. So they guessed the state, then they wanted to guess the city, which was a lot harder, and then they wanted to guess the school, which was a lot harder. So usually, but typically 20 to 30 minutes at the most. Oh, was that the end of our presentation? Oh, well, okay, so let me just address one more thing then. There's different varieties, different flavors of mystery Skype. I do because I've got a fourth grade class, I do where we guess the location of the class, but you can see that would be difficult for a kindergarten class or a first grade class to do. So I've also heard of those kinds of classes, that grade level, doing something like a mystery number. So they will get on and they will offer, the class will come up with a number in their head, a collective idea, the number 20, and then they'll ask the other kindergarten class questions to try and guess what number. It's a 2-digit number. It's number greater than 10 or something like that. I've heard of English classes in the secondary level doing like a mystery book. So they will ask questions or clues about characters or setting, trying to guess the book that the other class is thinking of. Nevada Reading Week is coming up next week. There's a Read Around the World where people will get on and they'll read your class a book virtually through Skype. So there's a variety of ways of doing it. But I really love the mystery Skype aspect where the kids have to guess and ask those questions and think critically and come up with the good questions. So so that's everything I know about Skype. Now you know it all too. Are there any other questions about Skyping or mystery Skype in particular? I guess they can't really raise their hand, can they, Mark? They got to ask that in the text chat.
We're going to give you a second. If you have a question, please type it into the text chat box.
I saw the question from Stephanie. What does the blogger do? If your class, it's an excellent question. If your class has maybe a class website or your class blogs, then they would like take pictures and they would kind of do a write up to put on the class blog to kind of share, hey, this is what we did. I've had a couple of classes do that to share it out with the school and with the parents who constantly monitor that blog, and so they see pictures and they see a write up. We blogged with such and such a class today. They were from Montana, and we were able to guess their state within 10 minutes or something like that. Just a fun way of recording what's happening and what's going on. Skype does need to have an app installed. So I don't know at your school if you have access to actually do the installation, but you do need to go out to skype.com, download the app and install it. It may take your SBT to do that for you, but it's a super easy install. Doesn't take much to do. Yeah, talking about pen pals, there's another fun global project called the Global Read Aloud. Was started by a fifth grade teacher back in Wisconsin several years ago, where classes read a common book. So there's like a select certain books that you can choose from, like a elementary class might choose a certain book, and each class reads it on their own, but then they get on through Skype and they communicate and ask questions of each other, kind of quiz each other, or have a discussion about the book and the characters and what happened in the book. So that's kind of a fun, rather than doing the old-fashioned pen pal where you write letters, you get on Skype and you communicate that way. That's a fun activity to do. The Google Mappers, a couple of questions still about the jobs. The Google Mappers are actually using Google Maps on the computer to help to help answer the questions, find those landmarks. Comes in really handy if you're guessing down to the city or the school, because then you can be looking at freeways, you can be looking at county lines, things like that.
Mark, Todd had the question. As a beginner, how understanding are people of the fact that you are a beginner at using Skype in the classroom, in your
Totally.
experience?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and they're very understanding. Other teachers I found are very, very understanding. I've had several beginners communicate with me as well. That's their first Skype, or especially like the very first Skype that I did at the beginning of the year was with a class that had already done 5 or 6. So their kids obviously knew what they were doing. My kids had never done it before, and they're very understanding. It's always helpful once you make that initial connection to schedule the day and time. It's always helpful to communicate with that teacher and set up the expectations. Some classes like to start out with the rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first. Others do some other methods. Some people ask certain kinds of questions, don't allow others. But in general, they're all very helpful and yeah, very willing to help out with that.
And Egon asks, is it mainly for geography students? How could it be used in some
No,
other content areas?
no. Yeah, you could do it with pretty much a lot of content areas. Again, I'm teaching 4th grade. I don't teach geography specifically, but it helps raise that global awareness. You could do other aspects other than the geography aspect. You could do the mystery book. I had a science teacher who hooked up with somebody who was trying to. They were doing the mystery element, so they had to ask questions to try and guess what element the class was thinking of off of the periodic table. And so there's many different ways that you could use it.
Lisa asked if she needs a static IP to Skype.
No, you do not. Good question. No, you do not need a static IP. I don't have one installed on my computer. It works beautifully. And you do have to be patient and flexible. Let me just say that because obviously you're dealing with different time zones. Skyping with somebody in New York is a little different than Skyping with somebody in California in terms of your time management. I had a Skype. I've had several Skypes drop at the last minute because the internet connection um, flaked out on somebody. I had one school, we were all set to do a mystery Skype back, I think it was Kansas, and they had a tornado warning. So they had to cancel that and go to their tornado shelter. So you just have to be flexible and realize, oh, you might have to reschedule it for another time. Or there might even be some places where your schedules just don't work because of lunch or prep or beginning and ending of time of school just doesn't work out.
Mark T, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, just wanted to show you some of your responses so that you can see what others are thinking right now. Mr. Skype and Author visit. Skype and Author would be great for my reading class. Mystery Skype element with a geography lesson. What is mined in your area? Um, it's Italian artists. I'm not going to go through all of these. Mystery Skype with advisory class as a short time period with only 20 minutes there. Pen pals. Geography application concerned about it might be too hard for first graders, or try it with favorite author. Virtual feed trip or read aloud with somebody from folks from North Carolina that you used to work with. Virtual field trips, a few responses of that along those lines. Having your class read to another class. Really like the author Skype. The idea of guessing the author with an ELA class. I like that.
Hey, Mark, can I jump in? I saw
Yeah.
a librarian up there mentioned using it in the library, which was another activity I did a few years ago where I hooked up a librarian here, one of our schools here, with somebody in Maine, and they did a mock Caldecott where they discussed different picture books that they thought should be nominated for the Caldecott Award. And then they had to hook up with the kids at the other library in Maine and have that debate about why you think this book, what's the qualities, what aspects of it do you like, and that was kind of a fun one way to integrate it in the library.
Okay, we had some questions there about just some of the concerns with something along the lines of using Skype. I always make it a point whenever I'm working with students and there's information going online, I don't use their last name. I'll use a first name, maybe a first name and a last initial if you have two students that have the same first name, just to differentiate, but you don't want to get that personal with them. We had a question, do we need special permission if we're going to Skype with someone out of the country? No, there's no special permission. The major concern there is the time zones. If you're going to Skype with somebody that's in Kenya, um, if it's an individual, they can probably, they might be willing to work with the schedule and do a Skype that's at midnight for them. But trying to Skype with a classroom in Kenya would be present some difficulties that I don't know if you could overcome. Gayla says, I'd like to Skype with kids and their counselors in the grief group, of course, with consent for forms turned in. Yeah, I would definitely talk to administration about something along those lines, because there is the ability to record the session. I do have some concerns about that potentially. One last thing that I want to show you. Mark, do you have anything you want to add to what I just said before I show this last little bit?
Nope, I disagree wholeheartedly with everything you said.
Just as Mark showed websites for accessing Skype materials, there is a Google Plus community for accessing the mystery hangouts. if you're not familiar with Google Plus, it is a social media platform, and there are communities on Google Plus for just about everything. But here we can see, people from South America. Um, I'm sorry, it's looking for someone from South America. This one's looking for grades 2 through 4, somebody in the Central Time Zone. We have a whole bunch of individuals that are here looking at how you can do, looking for people to do mystery hangouts with, and so that Google Plus community can be a resource for you there, and you can make those connections right there. If you've never joined a Google Plus community, if you just search in, for Google Plus and look for the communities, just type in Mystery Hangout and click on Join, and it'll tell me now that I am a member of this community. And it gives you instructions on how to do that Mystery Hangout and any other information that you can need that you might need right there. And since we all have Google accounts, and it doesn't require the installation of any software, sometimes that might be found easier to be easier, because you don't have to add any extra software as long as you have it's entirely web-based. If you have the microphone and the camera, you are good to go. All right, we were wrapping up here. Thank you for coming today.